All right, let's dive right into this fascinating explainer by Samuel Carter. He takes this highly viral and honestly kind of bizarre grocery store moment and uses it to expose the hidden complexities of the American food supply chain. It's basically a perfect example of how one totally normal everyday action can suddenly pull back the curtain on massive systemic blind spots that affect literally millions of us. Most of us have a very basic, unspoken expectation when we walk into a grocery store. If a package says it weighs 5 pounds, well, it should weigh 5 pounds. We aren't exactly in the habit of bringing our own personal scales to the meat aisle, right? But what happens when a shopper picks up a Kentucky Legend ham at a massive retailer like Walmart, expecting exactly 5 pounds, and the produce scale reads closer to 2? As Carter points out in his piece, we usually just grab a package, glance at the price tag, and toss it in our carts without a second thought. And honestly, that everyday autopilot is exactly what makes this whole situation so alarming. Section 1. The viral ham discovery and public outrage. So, as you can imagine, this massive discrepancy did not stay quiet for long. It sparked an absolute firestorm on social media, leading to some really tough public questions about overcharging and whether we were looking at evidence of industry-wide fraud. The evidence was just everywhere. Independent investigators and everyday shoppers were literally taking these packaged hams directly over to the in-store produce scales, proving these huge weight discrepancies in real time. And then, of course, they were blasting the videos across TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, X, you name it. Consumers were genuinely furious and, quite frankly, in total disbelief, asking how something this visually obvious could just go completely unnoticed by the retailer. Section 2. Anatomy of a supply chain, behind the shelf. To really understand how this happens, we have to look past the store itself. This kind of dismantles a very common assumption we all make, which is that a massive retailer like Walmart actually controls every single aspect of the product sitting on its shelves. The reality of a product's journey is a wildly complex web of companies that get involved long before you ever lay eyes on it. I mean, it starts with the farmers, right? Then it moves to processing and packaging facilities, travels through these sprawling logistics networks, distributors, and massive warehouses, before finally landing on the retail shelf. Because of that massive chain, the weight label you see on that ham is often generated long before it ever arrives at your local store. So the crucial takeaway here is that pinning down responsibility isn't a straight line at all. When there's a discrepancy, you can't just point the finger at the cashier or the store manager. These are the actual questions investigators need to be asking. Did the error originate all the way back at the processing plant? Was there a physical scale malfunction somewhere along the line? Did a software bug just incorrectly calculate the weight? Or was the product somehow mishandled somewhere in that massive distribution chain? Section 3. The corporate response. Taking action. This brings us to a really interesting chapter of the saga. What separates this incident from, say, a mere internet rumor or a fleeting conspiracy theory is that Kentucky Legend actually stepped up and took official corporate action. Kentucky Legend came out and formally acknowledged that a weight discrepancy issue had indeed occurred. They stated that the affected products were removed from Walmart locations, and they even indicated that safeguards were being implemented to prevent it from happening again. Now, this is a huge deal. Companies simply do not pull products from shelves just because of a viral video. This establishes for a fact that a legitimate issue existed, even if it doesn't automatically prove any sort of intentional misconduct. But here is where Samuel Carter's analysis really shines. While social media focused heavily on the initial outrage and the visual spectacle of those grocery store scales, the broader public discourse unfortunately ignored some incredibly critical, unanswered questions about the true scope of the problem. Like, how many products were actually affected? How long did this issue exist before someone finally noticed? Were any customers actually refunded for being overcharged? Did regulators step in to conduct independent inspections, or were fines imposed? Was this just an isolated production run, or something much wider? As Carter writes, these questions remain far more important than any viral clip. And this brilliantly illustrates why we need to look past the pure spectacle of a 60-second video and actually demand real transparency in our food systems. We really shouldn't let our curiosity just stop at the outrage phase. Section 4. The illusion of oversight and the government's role. Let's look at how this builds our understanding of the broader regulatory landscape, because honestly, this is where things get really surprising. We kind of naturally operate under this public assumption that government inspectors are constantly actively monitoring the products sold in our local stores.
But the reality is quite different. Various federal, state, and local agencies do technically share the burden of food labeling and weight verification, but they simply do not have the resources to inspect every single package in every single store. It's a logistical impossibility.
Therefore, the entire system fundamentally relies, well, heavily on trust. Manufacturers are expected to maintain accurate weighing systems on their end, retailers are expected to pull problematic products when they find them, and crucially, consumers are expected to report obvious discrepancies when they see them. The Kentucky Legend controversy is essentially a perfect case study of exactly what happens when just one link in this highly trust-based system totally breaks down.
Section 5. The Economics of Trust, Macro Consequences. Let's zoom out to the macroeconomic impact for a second, because this really isn't just about a few hams.
Think about the word millions. Samuel Carter points out that history is absolutely full of retailers facing lawsuits over pricing errors and scanner inaccuracies. Whenever you have millions of products moving through thousands of locations daily, even innocent, entirely accidental human mistakes are just bound to occur. At a micro level, maybe a single product is overpriced by only a couple of dollars. Most consumers will literally never even notice. But when you scale up that minor labeling error and multiply it by thousands of stores and millions of transactions, the macro impact means those tiny small errors become massively distorted sums of money. When the basic information presented to us is wrong, consumer trust becomes impossible and the market itself distorts. Section 6. Why this story matters beyond the hams. So why does this all matter so much? It's not just a passing internet trend. It strikes at the very core of our daily routines. For decades, we as consumers have been told to trust the labels, trust the systems, and trust the experts. And most of the time, as Carter notes, that trust is perfectly justified. But I absolutely love this quote from his explainer. The simple act of placing a package on a scale revealed something that thousands of shoppers, store employees, and managers had apparently overlooked. It's incredible, right? This beautifully captures the entire point. It shows us that trust without verification eventually just becomes blind faith. Consumers have to remain informed, observant, and entirely willing to ask questions. The reality is, this failure could stem from a bunch of different mundane things. It could just be a software issue. It could be a simple scale calibration problem at one packaging plant. It could be a totally isolated production error. Or, it could reveal much deeper weaknesses in a massive food distribution system that very few Americans ever get to see behind the scenes. Now, while there is zero evidence of some wild nationwide conspiracy, these possibilities highlight a desperate need for stronger oversight. Consumers really shouldn't have to play private investigator every time they go grocery shopping. That responsibility squarely belongs to the companies, the retailers, and the regulators. So, as you think about everything we've covered in this explainer today, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Is the real issue here the weight of a ham, or is it the weight of trust? Definitely consider that question the next time you pick up a package at the store. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep asking great questions, and I will see you in the next explainer.